I am gaming. I am gaming. I am gaming podcast.
Hey everybody, my name is Ivica. Thank you so much for being on the latest episode of I'm Gaming Podcast. This is a podcast about the video game industry, entrepreneurship, gaming nostalgia, and many more cool things I find to be in the same realm of business and creative ventures. Apparently, that's also serial killer narrative mechanisms that I'm going to discuss in this episode. But of course, there's so much more. Like always, at the very start of my new podcast, I want to say a big thanks to all of my Patreon supporters. You really make this podcast more than possible. You make it a reality. And that's why I can hit episode 146 right now, which is a lot of episodes, and all thanks to you. So please, everyone else, check out my Patreon supporters and their really amazing ventures. They have websites about the movie industry, games, streams, YouTube channels, NFT projects, and so much more. All of that is in the description below. If you'd like to support me, well, there's a link and you can check out my Patreon page and pitch in $1 or $2 per month. If you can, that would be hell amazing. So this episode is all about a type of hell that is generated by ordinary people, at least on the outside, and those are serial killers. Now, they are a big favorite of so many writers when it comes to books, but even more so when it comes to TV and movie production. I recently started watching a new TV show from Netflix, which is Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. Jeffrey Dahmer is, of course, one of the most famous serial killers and one of the weirdest ones that ever stalked the streets of the United States. And this TV show kind of does a dive into his mind. Of course, there are many TV shows like that and many works of art that explore the notion of serial killers. However, there is a big problem with serial killers, and I want to kind of point that out, especially if you're considering creating games or other works of art that focus on this phenomena. Well, on one side, it's really fascinating because, hey, it's a person who kills other persons or other people for who knows what reasons, but not because of material gain or kind of a criminal process in a regular sense, but because they want to fulfill some kind of a psychological mechanism in their mind. However, when it comes to narrative mechanisms, don't forget that all serial killers, including the Jeffrey Dahmer story, are basically the same. It's about a person, more than one person's, who goes out, kills people, and they get caught or they don't get caught, but in both of these cases, it's basically the same story over and over and over again. Now, in the case of the newest TV show, which is Monster, Evan Peters, is fantastic as Jeffrey Dahmer. He's really a really impressive actor, so there's that going for it. However, the other thing that the show is, in my view, focusing on is the pure sense of a really visceral and point-by-point, minute-by-minute experience that many of his victims had. It's basically going for the gritty approach. However, you still have the same mechanism. You have a story about a guy who killed people and got caught, went to jail, and that's it. You explore how he became that, which is also basically a story you heard before. He had a really bad, turbulent, and traumatic childhood. To different extents, of course, but still, it all boils down into kind of a similar process that we saw in all of the movies that we saw. No one becomes a serial killer because they have a memo on their job when they're 45 and then they decide, hey, I want to start killing people. It's always kind of pretty much the same story. There are weird kids who like to torture animals, basically, which are all scientific facts, but still very well known and regurgitated many times over, who then become someone who is kind of flirting with danger in terms of hurting others. They venture in and gradually become basically monsters that they become. Mindhunter is a TV show also on Netflix that managed to do a different take on all of this because they presented kind of a process of systematic approach to this issue, which was more interesting than the actual killings themselves, because in terms of Mindhunter, they created basically a framework from which everything is perceived. How do these killers or these incidents, let's call them that, fit into that system they're gradually building. So Mindhunter is basically about the system they're creating, not the actual mass murderers or serial killers that are presented in the show. That's a big difference. In case of Monster, Jeffrey Dahmer show, it goes for 10 episodes or something like that. I can see it becoming incredibly boring after episode 5 because the whole shock moment is past and it's gone. And again, we get the same story. A guy kills people, gets caught, it's a terrible thing, it's done. There's no insight, there's no a kind of a different perspective or spin to all of this, which is something that you should really consider when creating your own works of art related to these types of people who are, yes, extreme, but essentially boring because everything ends up being the same. Someone goes out, kills people, like Jack the Ripper, for example, and doesn't get caught. We have the mystery who Jack Ripper was. However, he's long dead, and it makes no difference. We have other people, like Jeffrey Dahmer, who get caught, but they're also kind of a finalized story. They're in jail, the killing ended, and that's it. So always consider that the basic serial killer story is just the start. It's just the starting point from which you should build further. Mindhunter did that and it was excellent. Jeffrey Dahmer probably won't, and that's why I'm guessing it's going to lose steam. I'm presently on episode 2. In your case, always consider that's just the jumping board. The fact that someone stalks and kills people isn't the story, it's the start of the story. Story should be about something else or lead to something else or develop into something else. Otherwise, you still get that Y junction. Someone's killing people, they get caught, they don't get caught. It's basically the same thing. The story ends and the killing ends as well. Even if you're making some kind of a documentary kind of thing and you want to open it up or leave the open ending as something that isn't still finalized, we don't have an answer, like the Zodiac did, for example, the famous movie from David Fincher, again, it still has to have a different perspective. It doesn't have to be and shouldn't be about the killer, but something else that is happening in that ecosystem of a serial killer. So my point here, takeaway would be, don't focus on the actual story of the serial killer. Set your story inside of the grander story of a serial killing process or whatever it might be. It's not easy, it's challenging. A lot simpler solution is to go the Dahmer story and simply follow the guy as he murders around, but it's going to end up being boring. Even murders become boring in narrative works of fiction. So keep that in mind and hopefully you'll create some amazing serial killer related works of art. That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Actually, there's nothing to watch, only kind of this title screen, but thank you for being here. Hope you liked this episode, hope you liked previous ones and you'll like the future ones as well. If you do, consider supporting me on Patreon. If you don't, well, thank you for being here anyway. My name is Ivica. Again, a big thanks to my Patreon supporters, a big thanks for you for sticking here, sticking around till the very end, and have a great week. I'll talk to you in precisely 7 days from now. Until then, bye bye.